Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we have to talk about the Orlando Magic victory over the Memphis Grizzlies in Berlin. But before we get into that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and try to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. And shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the pod. Again, shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the pod. Let's go ahead and get right into it. The Orlando Magic, once again, found a way to give Magic fans a true heart attack. I'm going to be honest with you. There was a point in this game I could not believe it. I could not believe it, y'all. Orlando Magic down by 20 points at one point early in the first half. And I gotta be honest with you guys, it was one of those things where I was playing in my head the same question. Can they really not get it done? Is it really that big of a stigma? The winning two games back to back. I know. It's getting annoying, but it truly was stirring in my head the entire time. I wasn't home to watch this game live. I had to catch up with it later on, but as I was keeping up with the score, I just kept asking myself, like, is the idea of this putting together a winning streak just so big of a concept for this team right now that even with all the circumstances in their favor, they still just can't seem to get over the hump. And then they kind of got it together. They got it together. They really strapped up on defense. Very proud of these boys in that third quarter to hold the Memphis Grizzlies to only 12 points. Grizzlies got off to a pretty hot start from beyond the arc. That slowed down and by proxy kind of slowed this game down in favor of the Orlando Magic. For the Memphis Grizzlies, this game was all about Jaren Jackson Jr. and the bench, pretty much. Shout out to Cedric Coward as well, who did have 17 minutes. He's got 17 points in 27 minutes starting at the shooting guard spot. You got, what's that, 25 plus 18. So we got about 43 points between Santi Aldama, G.J. Jackson, and Vince Williams off the bench. But this was all about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s ability to keep this team alive as far as the Memphis Grizzlies are concerned. 30 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 12 of 22 from the field, 3 of 5 from beyond the arc, 2 steals, 2 blocks. And he had a lot to do with why this game at one point looked really bleak for the Orlando Magic. He was hitting shots time after time. It kind of felt like him and Paolo Banchero were going back and forth with one another offensively, especially in the first half. If you guys remember the Underdog Fantasy Sponsor segment, we hit a lot of stuff, y'all. We hit a lot of stuff. I said lower on points, and I said higher on assists. Was wrong there. But I also said higher on rebounds. I did say lower on three-pointers. I will admit that. And he knocked down 4 of 8. And I'm glad to see that from Paolo, by the way. I did tell you guys a sneaky thing to grab was rebounds plus assists. You would have hit for, I believe it was 13 and a half rebounds plus assists. This was 13 rebounds plus 4 was 17. So would have been a solid spot. If you went 4 points, rebounds, and assists, which I believe was at about 32 and some change, would have hit. So there was a couple of things there that was missed, a couple of things there that was hit. But Paolo Banchero, nice overall game in my personal opinion. On 16 shots, very efficient again. 9 of 16 from the field, 4 of 4 from the free throw line, 4 of 8 from beyond the arc, 4 steals, and a plus 13, which was one of the more solid plus minuses of anybody for the Orlando Magic in this game. Desmond Bane did not have the quote-unquote vengeance game we expected out of him in 33 minutes. Only 13 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 of 13 from the field, 1 of 5 from beyond the arc. Still ended up being a plus 16 in his time on the floor. But this was the definition that you got the full Orlando Magic experience in a game like this. You get, a very strong performance from Paulo Banchero, but the team struggles offensively to the point that they get down early. Come second half, they strap their boots. They start to really lock in defensively. Fourth quarter hits, they really lock in, and before you know it, the Orlando Magic's resiliency puts them back in front, and then in this game they were able to hold steady and keep things steadfast, and eventually pull the game out. This was, I told you guys last podcast, I said this game was a must win. All the things that you could think of that should favor the Orlando Magic in a game like this were all converging at once. You get Franz Wagner back. You got the home crowd essentially on your back in Berlin because everybody and their mama is basically in favor of the Orlando Magic, given the ties to Franz Wagner, Mo Wagner, and Tristan da Silva. Desmond Bane's playing his former team. You're coming off of, 4 to 5 days worth of rest, and you're still facing that uphill battle of not being able to win consecutive basketball games. This felt like a must-win game, and I'm glad that despite, very similar to when I said to you guys about the Brooklyn Nets game, about a week and a half ago, like, a win is a win. And that's really how I'm going to look at this one. I can't give too much deeper analysis for a game that felt like this was a lot more competitive than it should have been, just given how stacked the deck was in favor of the Orlando Magic. By the way, like, Ja Morant did not play for the Memphis Grizzlies in this game. They did not. They still are without Zach Edey, right? Like, there's reasons why the Orlando Magic kind of walked into this game, like, should have kind of had their, the chest out, head held high, like, oh yeah, we're going to clear these guys. And it should have been because of everything that leaned in their favor. So this was the definition of, like, a win is a win. Like, it wasn't a great victory for this team, in my personal opinion, but, like, this is just a game they had to win, and thankfully they came out with the dub. If we focus more on Franz Wagner, right, I think he had a very solid outing for his time on the floor. I did tell you guys, I said I think he's going to be on a little bit of a minutes restriction. Nothing super intense, but I didn't think he was going to get to 30 minutes a game right out the gate. Played 26 minutes in this one, 18 points, 9 rebounds, 6 of 16 from the field, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc, 3 of 4 from the free throw line. Did not do super well in terms of taking care of the basketball. Did turn the ball over 4 times. That led everybody on the team, and did have the worst plus minus of all the starters at only a +5, still a net positive, but did struggle, and that was understandable, right? You're going to shoot 40% from beyond the arc when you're trying to get your legs behind you. You still have the jitters of the fact that you're, coming back, playing for the first time in about a month. You're playing in front of your home crowd. There's a lot of things that made it where I wasn't expecting Franz Wagner to go out there and drop 40. I did expect him to be very offensive-centric in a way that I think he was going to be aggressive in. He had 16 shots, equal to Paulo Banchero. I told you guys, the reason why I wasn't betting so high on Paulo Banchero was because I thought guys like Desmond Bane and Franz Wagner were going to be heavily featured given the connections that were associated in this game. And those two guys did combine for 29 shots in this game, which makes sense. That not only is that a typical shot distribution for this team, or should be a typical shot distribution for this team when fully healthy, but also it made sense even with Franz coming back from an injury that, like, they were going to try to see how much they could get out of him, out the gate. And he struggled early, but he really picked himself up. And that third quarter was where things really picked up, not just for Franz, but for the Orlando Magic in general. Just some other things that I thought were notable as far as talking about the German connections aspect. Mo Wagner also came into this game, only one other game under his belt after coming back from the ACL injury. So this is another, real ramp up time for him as well. Finished the game with 8 points and 4 rebounds in 14 minutes. Tristan da Silva finished with 8 points and 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 steals. Very active on the defensive end specifically, right? And after the game, Franz says, it's always a little different with the national team, but I thought the atmosphere was great. It felt like a real home game. It was awesome to see all the support. Shout out to the Magic for investing in this market and seeing how many people how many people that support our team. That was really cool to see for everybody. After the game I was just happy I made those free throws. Obviously, super cool to make some plays at the end and win the game at the end. I think I'll need a couple of weeks to reflect on everything. Of course, Franz was getting some MVP chants from the crowd as he knocked down a couple of free throws in the last 15 seconds of the game to really put the game away. So that was big time. So all the German guys balled out in their respective ways, played relatively well, all things considering. And again, like I said, I feel like this was one of those where you can't overblow it too much given the circumstances. But I just feel like the best reflection you can have on this game within 24 hours, 2020 hindsight is like a win is a win. A win is a win. The Orlando Magic play this team again on Sunday in London. Won't have the same atmosphere as far as the home crowd feel more than likely. Maybe it will because the international flair of the Orlando Magic is still a lot more prevalent than the Memphis Grizzlies, for example. But we'll see if this team can put together another win against the Memphis Grizzlies team. Maybe even come out with a little bit more energy and a little bit more urgency, given how they were kind of jumped on early in this game. Again, this first half for the Orlando Magic was not promising at all, and it took a lot of effort, especially on the defensive end, for this team to really put things back in perspective. One of the stats that I thought was very, very important in this game: 19 offensive rebounds for the Orlando Magic to the Memphis Grizzlies 7 offensive rebounds. Another thing I thought was very important: 24 points off of turnovers to the Memphis Grizzlies 19. Not a huge discrepancy, but still huge. 50 points in the paint to the Memphis Grizzlies 38. The physicality aspect of this Orlando Magic team is what got them back in the game. Again, the offensive rebounding numbers, the points in the paint, and the points off of turnovers all were things that really helped facilitate this team getting back in the fray. Being able to create so many steals off of active hands. Again, Paulo Banchero had multiple steals. Tristan Da Silva had multiple steals. All of those leading to big-time baskets in the second half. And then, of course, like I said, the offensive rebounding creates second chance points. And that was big for them as well as a team that ended up finishing the game with only 14 second chance points on those 19 offensive rebounds. But nonetheless, I think just the mere activity on the offensive glass was big time as far as being able to get the dub in this one. So, again, interesting way for this Orlando Magic team to get it done, but I'll take it because I feel like they desperately needed the win, and by hook or crook, they got it. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win up to 5,000 times your cash. Today on Underdog, we're going to look at two players. One, former Orlando Magic center Nikola Vucevic going up against the Brooklyn Nets on the road. I'm going lower than 10.5 rebounds in this game. Has 2 games in the last 3 where he had only 7 rebounds. Also going up against a Brooklyn Nets team spearheaded by Day'Ron Sharpe and Nicholas Claxton, who have the Brooklyn Nets as the number 1 defense in the NBA for the entire month of December. How that's translated so far through January, it's been touch and go, but nonetheless, this is a team that when they want to have high-level rim defense, they have two high-level defenders at the center position that might be able to keep Nikola Vucevic off the glass. I'm going to take lower on Nikola Vucevic rebounds. And then a guy I would love to see on the Orlando Magic, and I know a lot of you guys would love to see on the Orlando Magic too, as I've seen in the comment section. Russell Westbrook goes on the road against his former team in the Washington Wizards, and I'm going higher on 7.5 assists. I think Brody is going to be very active as trying to be an offensive initiator. Some of it's going to lead to him scoring, but I think a lot of it is going to lead to him creating opportunities for others on his team, because I think there is going to be a lot of attention on Brody, given the fact that he's even said it when he played up against, I believe it was the Lakers in their game earlier this week. He does get up for games against his former team. He may not play any differently, at least in his eyes, against teams that he, has played on in the past, but emotionally there is a certain part of him that views those kind of games as a little bit of a pick me up. I'm going to lean into that momentum and say that Brody starts to swing the ball around and really gets guys into the fray. I'm going to go with Brody higher than 7.5 rebounds. Download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Make, excuse me, underdog, make your picks and make some money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
Let's focus on something that I feel like is, and this is going to be a relatively quick segment, but I thought it was something that was kind of interesting. ESPN did their list of one player they believe will be traded at the trade deadline for all 30 teams across the league. And for the Orlando Magic, the answer, as opposed to the guy that we've brought up on the podcast quite frequently over the last few weeks, the guy that actually was brought up was Tyus Jones. I'm going to read exactly what was said by ESPN, which is: the Magic signed Jones to a 1-year, $7 million expiring contract with the belief he would provide an anchor to their bench and potential lead guard in closing lineups. Although he has started 8 games in place of the injured Jalen Suggs, Jones is on pace to play his fewest minutes since 2016-17. Jones is averaging 3.2 points and shooting below 40% from the field for only the second time in his career. The Magic are minus 7.5 points per 100 possessions when Jones is on the court. I think there's a couple of things obviously that stand out, right, when it comes to someone like Tyus Jones being moved. Number one is just the expiring contract in general is going to be favorable to somebody. Whether Tyus is included in a trade along with a Jet Howard or simply by himself as an expiring contract throw in, the Orlando Magic could easily be brought in as a third team in a 3-team trade as an expiring contract contribution and maybe get a few second round picks or something like that um in return for helping facilitate a much bigger trade amongst 2 other teams, right? There's a lot of different ways that the Orlando Magic could get involved without necessarily having to net the best player in a trade. Tyus Jones, to me, I feel like with the way that he's played so far this season, the fact that I feel like the Orlando Magic do desperately need more significant guard play off the bench. Because even when this team gets fully healthy, let's say Jalen Suggs gets back, you move Anthony Black back to the bench, or maybe you move Jalen Suggs to coming off the bench to protect him from himself. Nonetheless, I still think that the guard play for the Orlando Magic has been a little bit lackluster outside of Anthony Black this season. I'm also including Desmond Bane to a lesser degree in that as well, as far as just being consistent offensively. So Tyus Jones, Jonathan Isaac, Jet Howard. If I had to rank them in order of likelihood to still be on the team, I would say I honestly think that Jet Howard is the most likely to make it to the trade, make it through the trade deadline. I think his name has come up the least. I think that between the salary that he has paired with the fact that he is a player that I think the Orlando Magic could be able to return on a relatively cheap deal this upcoming summer if they did want him back. Having his bird rights is very favorable as opposed to moving off of him for what would probably be pennies on the dollar. Or the other thing that I would say is that Jet Howard, really to move him in any real capacity, would probably involve having to attach him to one of or both of Tyus Jones and Jonathan Isaac in order to be able to really facilitate anything. So I'm going to put him last because there's a lot of other things, or the most likely to still be on the team after the trade deadline, because there's so many other things that have to be done correctly in order to include him in a trade. Next would probably be Jonathan Isaac. I think that as much as I believe he should be moved, I think that the Orlando Magic have to hear the right deal to move Jonathan Isaac in a way that feels like A, they feel like now is the time to move off of him because again he does still have 3 more years of cost control that are non-guaranteed contracts moving forward, which you could view as a net positive asset for the Magic. On the other end of the spectrum, I think that his salary is the only one big enough to net any kind of real return if the Magic are trying to make some kind of move at this trade deadline, and especially with $5.6 million needed to shed in order to get underneath the luxury tax. They're going to have to move somebody. That part is set in stone. The Orlando Magic are going to have to move somebody. I wouldn't be surprised if a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves called as a team that's looking for more productive consistency at the point guard position. Maybe as a guy who's already, he's from the Minnesota area. Um, a guy who is familiar with playing next to star point guards and things of that nature. Maybe you can send Tyus to a place like the Minnesota Timberwolves, for example. Maybe you can get a buy low situation on Robert Dillingham. Like, I wouldn't hate that. He's a developmental project for sure, but still has 3 more years under contract as a former lottery pick selection. I believe he was taken 8th overall, so he has 3 more years of team cost control on a low salary value. Yes, it's long-term money, but it's on a low number. He could be an interesting pickup. Is it a little redundant with Jace Richardson to a certain extent? Maybe. But I'm not necessarily sure what other players from the I keep saying Memphis, from the Minnesota Timberwolves that they would be willing to give up, given the fact that they like Joan Behringer and things like that or whatever. But all that to say that I do kind of agree that Tyus is the easiest to move, especially because it feels like the point guard market is booming right now, especially because the price tag for a lot of these point guards is not super insane. So the ability to move off of them, as long as you get something of any real value, again, right, if you can move Tyus Jones and get a couple of second round picks, I'm sure the Orlando Magic would take that, just given that it puts them underneath the luxury tax. All that to say that somebody's getting moved at the trade deadline. We've talked about this a handful of times throughout the last few weeks, that the Orlando Magic are likely to do something. It might not be a splash move like the LaMelo Balls, the Darius Garlands, and those that were discussed earlier on in the season, but they're going to do something to get themselves under the luxury tax because this is a team that doesn't want to be anywhere near the second apron. So Tyus Jones might be the casualty of war in that situation. I hate that as a big Tyus Jones fan, but at the same time, I can't blame them. He's an expiring contract as it is. That might be their most favorable contract, most movable contract of anybody to help them get to where they're trying to be financially. Last but not least, something a little bit more lighthearted. Did y'all see that dunk by Anthony Black around 4, folks? Oh my goodness. Now, a lot of people will say, you know, for a guy like Anthony Black, maybe he's a better in-game dunker than a slam dunk competition kind of dunker. All I'm saying is the Orlando Magic have had a handful of participants within the last 2 decades in All-Star Weekend in the dunk contest. Tracy McGrady's done it, right? Aaron Gordon was nearly a winner 2 different times. Victor Oladipo was also in the dunk contest as well, if I'm not well, he was with Indiana, I believe, at the time. He may have done one with the Orlando Magic as well. I just remember the Black Panther mask one when he was with Indiana. But yeah, the Orlando Magic have had more than their fair share of dunk contest participants. And Anthony Black may have just had the dunk of the year. I'm just saying, if Anthony Black wanted to be in the dunk contest, I personally would not be mad at it. Continue to ride the momentum of a breakout season that you've had, averaging, 15 to 18 points per game, having a career year as far as being able to rebound and pass the ball from an assist perspective. Definitely has shown strides as a shooter. Perimeter defense is still improving night in and night out. And then you kind of put yourself on the world stage in the dunk contest. And as a hyper athlete, and then get in games like this one where he shows off that ability, now on a grand stage like All-Star Weekend, You get a chance to like show the world like another aspect of yourself. Like young man, go earn that, right? Mac McClung, despite the fact that he's never been like a full-time rostered guy for the Orlando Magic, is another guy that's affiliated with the Orlando Magic in one way or another throughout his career. I believe he played with the Lakeland Magic at one point. Like he's another guy that, has been very successful in the dunk contest. I'm not saying that it means that Anthony Black will win, but I would be a big fan of seeing Anthony Black as a participant. You guys let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about that. Me personally, I don't hate it, but maybe you guys don't love it. We'll see. With all that being said, there's been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the pod. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.